This is being recorded for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. Here we have George Myron Morris II. He was born on August 10th, 1932. There's no relation. Okay. So, to start, I'm just kind of interested in how it is exactly you got enlisted and you decided to be a part of the military service.
Well, my father was a flight surgeon in the Navy,
Mm-hmm.
and during the early 50s, there was a chance that you would be drafted into the Army if your number was called through selective service system, and rather than be a member of the infantry, I chose to enlist in what was then called the Naval Cadet Program. That involved flight training in Pensacola as a non-commissioned service person, at the end of which you received a commission and your wings.
Okay.
So I started flight training actually in August of 1952. 18 months later was commissioned and assigned to Patrol Squadron VP 47, which was flying at that time PBMs, and in our second tour of duty overseas we changed to a P5, a much newer plane, a much faster plane, and a lot more fun to fly.
What was the training like? Like, what was an average day in your training? What did that consist of?
That was usually rising at approximately 6 in the morning, get a little breakfast. It would depend largely on the weather in
Mm-hmm.
Pensacola and later on in Corpus Christi. If the weather was good, you could have a combination of ground school and flying various stages of your training, which could keep you active until as late as 7 or 8 at night.
Oh, wow.
It was very intensive training and covered everything from air-to-air gunnery to carrier landings and things of that nature.
Were you good at it? Were you good at flying? Like right away, or was it hard at first?
I was told I was a natural, and I didn't disagree.
Oh, that's really cool. That's awesome.
No, I love to fly.
Mm-hmm.
I spent as much time in the air as I possibly could. I volunteered for any kind of time, any kind of flight that I could get on.
Oh, that's
While I
really
was
neat.
in. Yeah.
Did you make a lot of friends while you were there? Did you know people that you went in with, or?
Yes, in flight training, we were usually in dorm type rooms of 8,
Mm-hmm.
eight people, each one of which would be at a different stage in training, so there was a constant rollover of your roommates.
Mm-hmm.
And during the 18 months of training, gosh, I probably roomed with 150 to 250 different fellows.
Oh, wow.
And but that was a big advantage in the sense that later on on active duty, you always were running into somebody that you knew
Mm-hmm.
from training. So it was kind of like development of a big family relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's kind of nice.
it really was.
I would like that.
Yeah.
Never exactly feel alone.
Now we had, unfortunately, we lost many of those people through plane crashes, more through automobile accidents than plane crashes, though, really.
Oh, wow.
But that was a part of the program as far as we were concerned at that time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something we had to live with.
Mm-hmm. So after your, I don't know, would you
Training.
consider that just basic, or what would you call that?
Basic and advanced. The basic
Okay.
in Pensacola, and then advanced in the tactical aircraft in Corpus Christi.
So in Corpus Christi, what was the difference in your training?
The difference there was we were flying much more sophisticated airplanes, and with a good bit more intensive concentration on what would be our main objectives in the fleet. But in Pensacola, it was purely just basic flying, everything from soloing through the various other stages. But Corpus was geared a lot more towards participation in fleet activity.
Okay. This is kind of a little more off topic. What is it like to be flying? How did that feel?
It satisfies one thing, it satisfies your need for speed.
I can imagine.
It really does. And of course, we were flying seaplanes, which is a different feeling entirely than flying on land. It's you have a whole different series of considerations with the conditions of the water, whether there are big swells or cross chop or cross winds and all of that sort of stuff. So it's a different kind of flying, but it's but the equipment that we had was, you know, well designed to take care of all the adverse conditions that we would run into. We flew through at least 3 typhoons, I remember, which were you know, similar to East Coast hurricanes, and I remember one time leaving Opama, which is just outside of Tokyo, and took off into a headwind that was so strong that we actually went as straight up as an elevator. So when we finally got to 3,000 feet, then we turned and took a different course and had that tailwind behind us. But we literally went up like an elevator.
That's crazy. That's very technical. Everything involved with that.
Well, it's all relative to the wind. Really.
Yeah, I guess that's true. A lot depends on that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So after you were at Corpus Christi. Corpus Christi in Texas, where was your next location after that?
That was joining the squadron in Iwakuni, Japan.
Okay.
And that was, in the interim, I did have one short stint in Coronado, California, for a course in what they call Fleet Airborne Electronics.
Okay.
And this was just a more intensive course still of the specifics of the kind of aircraft we were going to fly. Then it was off to Iwakuni to join the squadron there. And my first tour, I spent a good bit of my time as a navigator on the aircraft. And then on the second tour, I became plane commander, which meant I was the pilot in command of the aircraft.
So what was it? We'll kind of dissect those two a little bit, I guess. As being a navigator, what all did that entail?
That in those days we had nothing like the kinds of directional or locational types of gear that we have today. I mean, it was just particularly flying over large expanses of the ocean. There was very little in the way of electronically determining your exact location. So we depended on drift meters. In other words, noticing the drifting over the ocean, the direction of the drift, and shooting star fixes, which involved, at night at least, identifying 3 different stars so that you could triangulate them and give yourself a location. That was not anywhere near as accurate as what the GPSs are today,
Sure.
but at least it could keep you on course and keep you out of trouble.
That sounds really hard.
It was,
I would not want that job.
no, it was fun.
Was
it?
it?
Fun, and no, is the navigator in terms of on a mission in Japan on shipping surveillance. His main job at that time, since we were virtually always in sight of, or at least in radar sight of land, the navigator's really most important job was the specific location and notation of the position of the ship that we were taking pictures of at that particular time. And as it would, the way it worked, if we went out on one day and took a picture of a particular oil tanker heading towards North Korea, the flight that went out the following day would run into the same ship that had proceeded X number of miles, so that we could, the people in intelligence could combine all of this information and tell approximately the speed of the ship and whether it was loaded and all of that sort of stuff. So it was a kind of a joint effort between us and the intelligence community.
Yeah, that sounds pretty neat. And so then after you were navigator, you said you were...
Then
that's when you were...
Your normal progression was from navigator to co-pilot to pilot. I was fortunate in that my second tour I was flying with the exec, and I would normally have been relegated to just a co-pilot's position, but since the executive officer had so many other duties and could not fly all of the missions that we flew, I was then given the opportunity to fly as plane commander.
But that was pretty exciting.
Yeah, I was very tickled with that.
Yeah.
But it worked out well for me.
So what all did that responsibility include?
It included the safe handling of an aircraft that weighed about 100,000 pounds and the lives of 7 crew members. That was your ultimate responsibility.
How did it feel to be in charge of like your 7 other members?
We became very close. In the Navy, there's a degree of formality between enlisted men and officers. But in a flying situation, it was more like a bunch of friends, and a lot of the we dispensed with a lot of the formalities. It was just a matter we called each other by first names, and we expected each other to know his job and to do it well.
Sure.
And that's the way it worked.
So, I'm trying to keep track of where we are. So then, after you became, and what's the title of that? I know it's not co-pilot.
Plane commander.
Plane commander. Okay. So after you became plane commander, where was it that you were? Were you in Japan at that time?
Yeah,
or?
I was in flying from Iwakuni. We flew 4 different flight patterns. 2 of them to the west side of Korea, north as far as the 38th parallel, and then west to the Shandong Peninsula of China.
Okay.
And on the east side of Korea, we flew as far north as within 15 or 20 miles of Vladivostok.
Oh wow.
And it was on those flights that we sometimes ran into some of the larger ships from the Russian Navy. But it was kind of interesting to take pictures of them and have them taking pictures of us as we flew by.
Just in case.
But there was never any attempt to shoot us down or anything of that nature. But in all the pictures we could see that they had guns aimed at us if in fact we had done something wrong.
Sure.
So.
No, I guess that makes sense.
But no, as a matter of fact, one day we lost an engine and had to abort the mission and had turned to fly to home on the one engine, and it wasn't 10 minutes and we had a Russian Tu-2 that had been just sent out from Vladivostok, came up, was flying wing on us, just to make, if in fact we had gone down, then they would have sent out people to pick us up.
Oh, wow.
But and at that time we would have been technically prisoners of war. But they saw that we were fully capable of flying on one engine, and we returned home without incident.
Okay. So while you were over in Japan, that whole region, where were y'all, like, I understand you guys weren't in the plane the whole time. Where were y'all on your downtime and when you weren't flying?
We were at the base in Iwakuni. This was a base, incidentally, that had been used by the Japanese Air Force in World War II to train their kamikaze pilots.
Oh, wow.
And I remember one day when I had first arrived to see the chief that was on duty with me giving a sandwich to this old Japanese man who was sweeping the floor. And as the old Japanese left and bowed very courteously and all that, I asked the chief, I said, "Do you always feed him?" He said, "Yep." He said, that man during World War II was the commander of this base. And he had decided at the end of the war that he loved that base so much that rather than live in comfort with his family in northern Japan, he would rather stay there and sweep floors and just be close to the base that he loved so much.
Oh my gosh, wow.
And this was very typical of the Japanese people. They were, of course this was roughly 10 years after only about 7 years after a war that they had lost and had suffered just horrendous losses at Hiroshima and Kagoshima. And it was just, the people were just about as polite and nice and honest as you could ever imagine. The picture that we had of these bloodthirsty heathens and that showed up in the American movies it just wasn't the case at all. I mean, these were honest, polite people that had not an ounce of greed in them. They were just, they were lovely, lovely people. And I enjoyed meeting many of them.
Did you get to go out into like the town and culture and kind of get a feel of it that way too? Yes,
we did. We on our downtime, we could go to some of the other cities of the cultural centers of the country. I remember specifically going one time to Hiroshima, which of course had suffered that tremendous trouble with the atomic bomb hit, and it was a very sobering thing to go through that museum and see the remnants of human forms that had just been burnt into a concrete wall. I mean, it was something. I do remember on the bus ride back, this giant fellow, a sumo wrestler, sat down next to me, and I really didn't quite know what to think of this at the moment, but it turned out that all he wanted to do was to learn to speak English a little better.
Oh.
And he was just this friendly giant. All he wanted to do was to learn a few words of English. So, but again, that was an example of how nice the people were.
And that is a lot different from what you're used to. I don't know. Everything I feel like with war, it's always like, us versus like the evil enemy kind of thing. So it's interesting to hear that point of view.
Well, it has to be while the war is going on. That's
Sure.
the motivation.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard it said many times, and it's in many ways it's true, that we would have been better off fighting against the people we fought with certain exceptions, and with the people we fought against. Speaking more of this specifically talking about the Russians at that time. That
Sure.
We're not, and of course not. We obviously wanted to have the English on our side. But the Japanese turned, and of course, the way they turned their economy around was just nothing short of amazing.
Sure.
Because they were very, very hard-working people.
Absolutely.
We were told when we arrived that this was the land of the 3 B's, of bicycles, babies, and bowing. And that's the truth. They were very polite. They bowed to everything and everybody. And it seemed like everybody had a baby. They were riding around on a bicycle.
That's too funny. Did you get a lot of different foods while you were there? Again,
Yes.
This is off topic, but I am curious.
Yes, and the Japanese sushi was something that was not anywhere near as popular then as it is now. But the tempura was delicious. I remember going to a restaurant called the Kaisaro restaurant, and getting a meal of, this was like in '55, of all the fried rice I could eat, and a big chunk of Kobe beef, which is the best beef in the world, and all the sake I could drink, and the whole tab was $1.50.
Oh my gosh.
And I went back to the same restaurant on business some 15 years later, and it cost $100 just to walk in the door.
Oh my gosh.
So there had been some inflation.
Yes, maybe a little. Oh, that's too funny. That would be nice, though. I am a fan of fried rice. I can say that openly.
And a lot of Oriental foods I very much love. I don't think there's anything in the world better than Peking duck.
Oh, yeah.
And the Koreans have a barbecued beef they call bulgogi, which is just simply delicious. And of course their kimchi is a little on the hot side. But,
Now you're making me hungry. I figure get some Chinese food after this. Go to Taco Sushi before I leave or something.
Yeah.
So, as far as any like contact, like battles wise, did you ever? You said you kind of got shot at a few times.
Yeah, there were a couple of gunboats that were North Koreans that did take exception to us trying to fly too close, and but while they did shoot at us, it was more, I think, at that time. This was after the armistice had been signed, And I think it was more a matter of just trying to make us keep our distance than it was to be seriously trying to shoot us down. We were fortunate. We had no real dangerous situations arise.
It'd still be a little scary though.
Well, it was. We would fly sometimes, and I'm sure you've heard of the MiG-15, which the North Koreans were flying, which was supplied by the Russians, but a beautiful airplane. And on occasion, we would be flying along, and a MiG would come up and fly on our wing, and we would be taking a picture of him, and he'd take a picture of us. And but he couldn't go as slow as we could, so as we would slow down, and he'd try to keep with us. Then he just stalled. He just could not fly as slow as we could. So, but there was no danger involved, and I feel very fortunate that I was never in any serious danger.
Absolutely. So what was, we talked a little bit about like what your main job was, but could you explain a little more thoroughly? I forgot what you said earlier.
On shooting surveillance?
Yes.
We would locate a ship at sea, and we would then fly parallel with it. Okay. Taking pictures out of the side of our aircraft. One of our crewmen would be taking the pictures. We would fly at about 50 feet off the water.
Oh, so really, really close.
Yeah.
Okay.
And get within it as close as we could to get good definition of whatever they may have been carrying on deck or things of that nature. But then we would note the speed of the ship, whether or not it was loaded with. We'd notice its direction, and all of this would be logged and passed on to the people in intelligence. Okay. But it was strictly a matter of getting that ship's location that day so it could be computed to where it was the next day and the day after and so on and so forth. Okay.
And were those normally ships that were like on our side, or ships that weren't?
Oh, no.
Or they were.
These would all be ships that were heading for North Korea and holding many of them were oil tankers. Okay. Some were carrying goods on deck, which could have been anything from foodstuffs to munitions to who knows what. Okay. Parts for aircraft or anything. But a lot of their equipment had to come in by ship. And it was our job to keep track of as much of it as we could anyhow.
Okay. Well, now that kind of, I knew that you had talked about like the training, like with being close to the water, but I mean, y'all were like right there on the water, so that does take a lot into account with like swells and, I mean, I guess like humidity and stuff too.
Actually, the waters and for landing in the open ocean, you are gonna be very concerned with the swells, the pattern of the swells and all of that. But as far as our flying to take pictures of the ships, we normally didn't clip the tops of the waves. We had, but in our aircraft was not the speediest aircraft in the world. We normally fly at about 180 or 190 miles an hour, something of that nature.
Did you get a chance to fly any of the faster ones, or?
I never flew jets. I flew some twin engine and single engine attack aircraft, just transporting them.
Okay.
Just before I got out of the Navy, I was attached to a FAS-RUN unit, which was a unit that transports aircraft from one place to another. So I did get to fly, 10 or 15 different types of aircraft. But,
that's kind of neat.
Yeah, it was. That was fun. It was. They're all different. And they're all have their own flight characteristics, and so you do want to, you want to. And of course, all of the ones I ferried were these were land-based aircraft, so it did behoove me to remember to put the wheels down. I wasn't doing that flying seaplanes, but moving the aircraft around the country, it helped.
It's important, yes. What was your favorite one that you flew?
The favorite aircraft I flew? Mm-hmm. Well, other than my tactical aircraft, probably the S-2F.
And what is that
my
one?
favorite. That was an attack plane that the plane I always wanted to fly, but never did was it's called the Corsair, the F4U, and that was a plane that had inverted gull wings that just looked to me like an airplane, you know.
Oh, cool.
It was none of those were tactical when we were in Korea. They'd all been replaced by the jets. So, but that was the one plane I did want to fly.
That's cool. That's cool though that you were able to get the experience of flying all those different ones though. I mean that's kind of a nice little, because is that right before you?
Right before I got out. Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice little final.
Yeah, that was. It was kind of a nice plus.
Here, fly all these planes.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service.
And pick them up from various places too.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
So I'd fly commercial to maybe someplace in Texas, and then pick the plane up and fly back.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's
and nice. I did on one flight do I'm not sure I should tell you about this because it was illegal.
It's okay.
But anyhow,
shh, I won't tell anyone.
If you won't tell anybody, I did fly down and in through the Grand Canyon.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did. That was a kick. That was a kick.
When did you do that?
That was just before I got out.
It was in that same little time period?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, flying and dodging in and out there down there. That was...
I'm jealous. I've even been to the Grand Canyon.
That was fun.
Yeah. Oh wow.
But that's not something that Uncle Sam wanted me to do. This airplane, I guarantee you.
You deserve it. Oh, that's too crazy. Well, very cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and you sharing your stories with me and everything.
Not like some of these guys with the excitement of real wartime adventures.
But those are real wartime adventures. Are you kidding me?
But it was an interesting period of my life, and I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was a funny thing when I went into flying. I wanted the Navy to give me fighters. And they gave me multi-engine seaplanes. I wanted the East Coast, and they gave me the West Coast. I wanted electronics as a secondary billet, and they gave me survival. And if I had it to do all over again, I'd do it exactly the way they made me do it. It was they knew me better than I knew myself, and it just worked out fine as far as I was concerned. It really did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. I guess they know what they're doing.
I guess they do.
Well, thank you.